So, good morning and welcome to Policing TV. I'm joined by John Toomey, who I met in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago and introduced by a mutual friend. John has considerable experience in the mental health and well-being and advising a range of those in Australia and more widely on mental health matters. In fact, John, you very kindly gave me a copy of your latest book when we met, which I found fascinating. Perhaps more of that in the conversation that we now have. So, um, you can give an introduction to yourself far better than I can, John. So, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background and how you came into working in the well-being space?
Hey, thanks, Bernard. So I was originally born and partly raised in the wild Darling Downs of Queensland. So that's way out west of Brisbane, very harsh country. Lived on a large cattle station, then a dairy farm, and then my dad eventually became a publican. So you can imagine what it would be like running a country pub. When I was 10, he sold that pub because by then I had 8 siblings and we moved to inner suburban Melbourne, which is a bit like moving to inner suburban Chicago, you know. And back in those days, it was very multicultural. There was a lot of, it was pretty intense. So growing up in that pub, I got to observe a lot of things. And people often say to me, how did you become a speaker? And I say, well, living in Collingwood back in the 70s, you either had to be able to fight or run fast or talk, and I couldn't fight and I wasn't very quick. So there we have it. But I went on through my schooling and played Aussie rules, loved playing Aussie rules and cricket, and went on and studied physical education because I was so passionate about human performance. And I used my learnings in my own sport and I got to a pretty good level. Then I transitioned across to work in high performance roles in professional football and some in cricket and also professional cycling and triathlon, and even coached an Olympic weightlifter in Paralympic weightlifting. Um, so, and the really interesting thing about working in high performance roles in sport where you're looking after 45 or 50 elite football players, this is Aussie rules football, you come across so many challenges, players, physical challenges. Some players just do not fit your Western science textbooks, so you've got to really step outside the box. So that led me to talking to yogis and qigong masters and wushu masters and learning a lot more about my craft. But also players got different mental states and different things that motivate them or inspire them. So that also led me to step outside the box and start exploring all sorts of traditional perspectives around what drives the human soul and the human mind. So I started studying Buddhism and Taoism and Hinduism and all these amazing philosophies. And along the way, I then discovered some great work coming out of the US called the Avatar course, which is a 9-day experiential program exploring consciousness. And basically, you start to untangle your mind and you realize that your mind is just a mind. It's not the ruler of the world, you know. And eventually, I got to a point where I actually really woke up and found a deep level of peace. Now, after I left football, working in football in the late 90s, I went full time as a speaker and I started to expand my skills. And I've tended to specialize in industries that are male dominated. Now, it's not exclusive of women, but mining, construction, engineering, oil and gas, some emergency services. And I've had a strong connection to policing because I used to train the physical training instructors at the Victoria Police Academy in Melbourne. And I've had a lot of friends in the police force, some of them no longer with us, and even some relatives, police officers. And I've always had a strong connection with them and often been playing a support role and really helping all of them. But I never, ever choose to treat any of them like they're a victim. I treat them as a really competent, capable person who's experiencing some extreme challenges that I know they can get through with the right support. So I've always
So
had a
clearly,
fascination in this area, Bernard.
clearly, policing TV is focusing on the policing side of things, and so you've got this breadth of experience from Aussie rules football through mining, through construction, the first responders and the like. Um, Using that breadth of experience, what are your observations looking in on policing in Australia and perhaps more widely as to the state of mental health and well-being, and what steps do you think would be useful to help those working in policing have and enjoy better mental health?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I think that, one of the pathways to really strong emotional and spiritual well-being is participation in some form of selfless service that's aimed at making life better for others. So policing's right in the front row there, So people who step into policing are mostly people who have got this yearning to serve, to bring value in some way to a community, to society. So let's put that at one point. The next point is that life has ramped up. I mean, you look at the change that has happened now. In 1985, I bought my first computer. The only reason I bought it was because I knew computers were going to take a big part of our life, and I thought I'd better learn how to use this thing. Now, in the same year, I bought a two-bedroom home that cost me $59,000. That computer cost me $12,000.
Wow.
And nobody saw the size of the IT industry that was going to come, because back then everyone was saying computers are going to take everyone's jobs. Right? Well, that didn't happen, did it? But also nobody saw the internet coming, and the incredible change across societies, much bigger populations, changing cultures because of immigration and that sort of thing. So police now have to deal with 1,000 times the variables that they used to have to deal with 50, 60 years ago. Yeah. And also, these days, because of the internet and because of smartphones, police are under incredible scrutiny all the time. And if you've got a government that isn't prepared to stand strong behind the back of police, but are more worried about perceptions and negative press, then you've got police facing all of these challenges without the stability of someone of strength standing behind them saying, I endorse our people's work. So it's almost like I feel like sometimes I feel really sorry for the police, because it feels like they're tiptoeing across quicksand, you know, and it makes it very, very challenging. But how they get through that, I think, is partly about how they choose to grow as human beings and how they use these challenges to improve themselves and better themselves as people.
So it's part of what I heard you say there was that the support from others broadly in authority for those on the front line is key. So
Yeah.
the support of government, the support of um, the leadership in policing to those that are particularly those at the front line that are working in policing. Of course, that's also to acknowledge that leaders themselves don't always enjoy perfect mental health, but it's that support that's key. What about from what sorts of things can individuals do to further improve their own personal mental health? Are there, for example, um, exercises or approaches that you adopt with your clients that um, help them better tackle, what's going on in their head?
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. And it really comes down to where our attention goes. Now, if you look at, older traditional cultures, most young people, they went through a sort of a ritual based pathway to becoming an adult, whether to become a man or to become a woman. Now, women have that one ritual they can't get away from, and that's giving birth to a child. That's such a threshold that they have to cross. But with men, it's not as obvious. And so, really stepping into that place where they feel like, okay, I'm a robust, strong, independent man here, and I can conduct my life and manage my life on my terms. A lot of men actually go all the way through life and never get there. But you see, it's about where your attention's going. So, say, for example, you're in a situation where maybe there's a fire, and all of a sudden, all of your attention is out on the fire, on what's going on around, and you're looking for potential threats, and you're assessing constantly what's going on around you so you can play the most useful role, give the most guardianship to the situation. You're paying attention. But the flip side of that is that when something's not demanding your attention, it can slip back into your mind, and all of your attention could be on your thinking. And it could be on a worry about the future. It could be on some harsh self judgments about something you think you should have done better. Or it can even be regretting something or digging into something really negative. Now, if people don't know what I'm talking about, just think of the time that you got into your car, probably recently, drove 40 minutes across town and arrived at your destination with no recollection of the trip. Where was your attention? There was just enough out on the driving, the rest of it in the mind. And this is the trick, because we cannot spend too much time in our minds, because it's a trickster, it doesn't know the real truth, and it's made up of all sorts of mucky perceptions and inventions and perceptions, and it's no good. So the trick is to get our attention out into the world. Start smelling the roses, start enjoying what we see, but also making every opportunity to connect with another person. Because we don't have to be rescuing somebody from a bandit to be doing good. We can actually just connect with another human being and say, hi, how's your day? What
You
have you been
you were
up to?
telling me
You
a
know?
story. You were telling me a story before we started this recording about an individual you were talking to who was talking about his mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll invite you to tell the story, but in effect, the dangerous neighborhood that was in his mind. So
Yeah.
hopefully
Well,
that sort of reminds you of the story that you were telling.
yeah, it does. It's yeah, he was a fantastic guy. He was a real character, and he didn't know whether he was Arthur or Martha. And but he just looked at me with this wry smile on his face, and he said, John, my mind is like a dangerous neighborhood, and I should not go in there alone. And that's what happens to people.
It,
Our minds become a cesspool. I mean, I would ask any of the people tuning into this, are you your own harshest critic? Because if you are, I invite you to stop it. Start recognizing the fact that you're a good person. And when you go out in the world and you connect with others and you give people a bit of a hand here, you're friendly to somebody there, you compliment somebody on the way they're dressed, you're acting in a way that reminds you of what a good person you are. And the more of that you do, the easier it is for you to get your attention out in the world and to spend less time in negative thought. But the other clue about that is the more of those things that you do when you lay down at night and you cast your mind back over your day, you realize you've done good and your mind will leave you alone and allow you to sleep.
I'm sure, well, I know for a fact that there are no end of approaches and techniques and experiences and insights, John, that you have that would be enormously helpful to not just to those in policing, of course, but those more widely, as you've demonstrated in your work. Um, what I'm going to do, if I may, for the time being, is bring this conversation to a close. and express the interest in our having further conversations similar to this over the coming months. We may occasionally invite a guest in, somebody in policing to have to support us in those conversations. But mental health and well-being in policing is so important. There are organisations, individuals that are available to support, but having more support available, including on policing TV, and I would encourage those particularly in Australia, to get in touch with John, and we'll make sure that your contact details are available, John, associated with this video. But look, fascinating talking to you. It was fascinating talking to you when we met in Melbourne. I look forward to our meeting again in person in the near future, and indeed to our continuing these conversations on policing TV. But for the time being, John, can I thank you very much indeed, and encourage those that have been in some way um, engaged, particularly engaged by these conversations, do make contact direct with John. But John, for the time being, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Bernard. Really enjoyable, and I too look forward to catching up with you and perhaps even talking more to your listeners.